This is the Ronbus R3 Nova, and if you've looked at the thumbnail, you'll know that I already think very highly of this paddle. Ronbus introduced their Nova series a few months back, which was what they called a Gen 3 paddle, essentially a thermoform paddle that aimed to solve the delamination and core crushing issues that plague many of the Gen 2 thermos on the market. You can watch my review on the R1 Nova to get more detailed info on its construction, but essentially what they did was replace the carbon fiber seam around the edge with a carbon fiber grid structure to allow pressure to be released from the thermoforming process, which in turn prevented damage to the honeycomb core while in the mold. As for how the R1 Nova played, I found the grid structure to make the paddles less stiff and powerful than the other thermoform paddles, while still more poppy and powerful compared to the Gen 1 cold press paddles. While I didn't find the paddle itself to play drastically different to what was already on the market, I have nothing bad to say about the R1 Nova and do appreciate the engineering that went into it. With the R3 Nova, Ronbus has not only released the Nova in a new shape, but it's also made a few changes to the Nova structure as well that we'll get into later. The R3 still has the 5.5-inch handle length and 16mm honeycomb core, but now has a more rectangular shape with a 16.5-inch total length and 7.5-inch width. This rectangular elongated shape gives the paddle more power on baseline drives, but comes at the cost of being slower to swing than paddle shapes that do have a curve at the top. One other benefit of the rectangular shape that I don't feel like is often talked about is the sweet spot of the paddle. Because there is a bit more paddle surface area near the top of the paddle compared to the curved shapes, it also means more weight is distributed towards the head. That extra perimeter weighting near there allows the sweet spot to sit even higher on the paddle face. For me, personally, as an ex-tennis player, I have a tendency to prefer hitting my shots in that area, so I've always found that I don't mind sacrificing that maneuverability at the net for a better contact point when hitting my shots. Compared to Ronbus's Gen 2 elongated paddle, the R3 Pulsar, I found the Nova to be an upgrade. In my review of the R3 Pulsar, I found the paddle to be on the softer end for thermoform paddles. It could still generate great drives at the baseline, but it lacked pop and didn't have as much power at the kitchen line. I really enjoyed the spin on the paddle and did use it as my primary paddle for a bit, but ultimately switched away for something a bit less head heavy. Now with the R3 Nova, that change to the carbon fiber grid has given the Nova a bit less perimeter weighting, which leads to a lower swing weight for more maneuverability at the net, less power on baseline drives, but also a bit more pop and also control. The lower swing weight I found to be a great added benefit since I always found the Pulsar to swing a bit too slow for me. Although the Nova does have less perimeter weighting, surprisingly the sweet spot doesn't suffer, and I did find it to be comparable to the R3 Pulsar. As mentioned earlier, Ronbus has also made some slight adjustments to the carbon fiber edge grid structure as well. With the R3 Nova, and now the newer models of the R1 Nova, they've adjusted the angle and density of the carbon fiber edge grid. The owner of Ronbus mentions that this allows the paddle to play soft shots, but stiffen on hard shots, so the power output and swing speed input has a linear relationship. In terms of how I actually found this to play, during shots like resets and drops, I found the control to be very good. Shots felt responsive off the paddle face, and it had a crisp feel to it, where I felt like I could dial down the power easily. On the other hand, at the net, I did find the Nova to have good pop and put-away power on block and punch volleys when I did want to speed up more. However, on baseline drives and serves, I found the R3 Pulsar to have more dwell time than the Nova, which allowed for me to generate more plow-through and power with the former. As for the spin, it's always been great on Ronbus paddles, and with the R3 Nova, this is no exception, so I found no noticeable differences between spin generation on the Pulsar versus the Nova. Personally, I didn't find the need to add any lead tape, as I really enjoyed this paddle out of the box. I didn't think I needed to increase the stability or expand the perimeter weighting for more power and sweet spot. This is different from the R1 Nova, where I was constantly messing around with different lead tape configurations, which I feel is a must-do for paddles with that curved shape compared to the rectangular shapes. In summary, the R3 Nova has a manageable swing weight for an elongated paddle, decent power from the baseline, good pop at the net, and good control on shots that require more touch. On paper, this does sound a bit similar to the Neonic Force, but that paddle has even more pop, less control on drops, a lower sweet spot, and also less power. Ultimately, it comes down to your preference on what you want to look for in a paddle, but for me, I really enjoy the characteristics of the Nova. If you already own an R3 Pulsar or are a fan of elongated paddles, I think the R3 Nova is worth checking out, as not only does it provide some minor differences in the thermoform market, it's also a paddle where you won't have to worry about core crushing or delamination. However, if you are coming from an older R1 Nova, I don't think the R3 shape is for you if you don't want that higher swing weight, but I do recommend ordering the new version of the R1 Nova with the upgraded carbon edge grid, as I do find it to play better than the original. The R3 and R1 Nova retail for $180, but I've linked my discount code here and in the video description below that will get you $20 off your order from the Ronbus website.